Hey guys, I thought tonight I would hop on here and I would talk to you about Connor's tonsils and adenoid removal surgery and what all happened there, because it was a huge ordeal and nothing went as planned. So Connor was snoring. He would toss and turn in his sleep like crazy tossing and turning. That's part of the reason he was still in the crib. If he napped on the couch, like during the day while we were home, he would he would toss and turn so bad. We normally didn't let him sleep on the couch for that purpose, even for naps. We'd go put him in his crib. But the few times he did sleep on the couch, he would toss and turn so bad. At one point, he napped on the couch one day and he fell off 4 times during one nap. And so it was just crazy. And so we went to the ENT. We were fixing to have his second set of tubes put in his ears, and he asked us how's he sleeping, because he kept mentioning a sleep study, and I kept putting it off because I knew Connor wouldn't sleep. Connor's all about his routine at bedtime, and I knew it would just be a big ordeal, and probably shouldn't have, but I kept putting it off. And so he asked me, does he toss and turn in his sleep? And I'm like, yes, like violently, almost like crazy almost. And he would whine in his sleep, but he wasn't like fully awake, but he would wake up kind of crying, whining. And so, and he asked me if he snored, and I'm like, yes, he snores all the time. There's not a time he did not snore. And he was like, we probably should go ahead, we probably should take those tonsils and adenoids out. And then he did something that I loved, and this is one of the many reasons I love him. He said, you're his mom. What do you think? Do you want to take them out now? Do you want to wait a while? Do you want to do a sleep study? What do you want to do? And I said, I want him out. If you think he has sleep apnea, which is what he told me, with all those signs, he's definitely stopping breathing during the night, and that's waking him up and causing all these things. But we wouldn't know for sure until a sleep study. But he's like, what do you want to do? And I love that. I know I'm not a medical doctor by any means, but I love when doctors will keep you involved and be like, what's your opinion? You're around them the most. You're the mom. And they'll give you their medical opinion, of course, but they'll ask you your personal opinion since you know the child so well. And so I said, I definitely want to do it. They thought the adenoids would help a lot with him being sick so much, and I want to do anything that would help him with his sickness. So I'm like, yes, definitely, I want to do it. And so I asked him if we could do it at the same time as the tubes, because I didn't want him put to sleep more than once. Tonsils and adenoids was his 5th surgery, and I did not want to make it 6 if we could help it. I just wanted him put under one time and do it all at once. And he's like, yeah, absolutely, we can do it. So we did it. The day of surgery, everything was okay. I was very nervous. I get nervous every time, but ever since his eye surgery, it went so horribly awful that, and I'll do another video about that sometime, that I am just a complete basket case nervous wreck, and I never really was before. I was like his first ever surgery, but I kind of calmed down after that, because none of them have been bad. He's always woke up happy, in a good mood. He's groggy and tired, but nothing was like the eye surgery. Anyway, after the eye surgery, I'm a basket case. So I told him I'm nervous, anyway. So the surgery went good. I think it took about 30-45 minutes. Everything went great. They came out and told us everything went great. We were gonna stay overnight just to monitor his breathing. They like to do that if they're young, and they also did it because he has Down syndrome, and a lot of times they have trouble with anesthesia, which we know that because he's been put under so much, and they have some issues with their oxygen dipping afterwards because they're so swollen and their air passages are so tight and stuff. And so we knew we were staying overnight, so they let us go back to the room that he was going to be in, and they brought him in to us. He was sleepy, but he was okay. And so I held him, and we talked to him, and he was just real groggy and tired. So they settled us into our room. We took all our stuff in there, had my overnight bag and all that, and course, I was updating everybody, and everything was all good. And I stayed that night, just me and him, and everything was okay. We were having trouble getting him to drink. He didn't really want to drink, and I was really concerned about that because he gets dehydrated so fast. And I got him to drink a little bit. You could tell, like they said, stay ahead on the pain meds, give the pain meds every 4 hours, and don't like back up on the pain meds or try to be a hero or anything like that. Keep him on the pain meds. And it was hydrocodone, so it was some heavy duty stuff. And like 30 minutes after you give him pain meds, try to get him to drink as much as he will, because that's when he's going to be feeling the best. So he would drink. I actually got him out of the bed a little bit and let him get up with me holding him. He couldn't walk or anything. He was so groggy. But anyway, so we spent the night. During the night, his oxygen started dropping, and they were trying to keep from putting oxygen like on him. And so they were like bringing the mask and putting it near him, because we were trying not to wake him up, because he was so mad, because he was so tired. Like I said, bedtime routine, so he was in a different place and he was super mad. So they would kind of just lay the oxygen mask in front of him, and it would go up, and then he'd turn or toss into sleep, and it would go down. So the nurse, which he was phenomenal, we actually know him, I'm not gonna blast his name on here, but he was great. He kept coming in and putting the oxygen back near his face, and it would make him mad. He'd wake up a little, and then when he'd fall asleep, he'd dip again. So then the next day, the doctor came around to make rounds. We actually didn't see our doctor. We saw like his nurse practitioner. We'd never saw her before, but she was super nice. And she said, I seen where his oxygen dipped like all throughout the night, and so he's doing fine when he's awake, but when he's sleeping, he's needing oxygen. So I don't know that he will discharge you. And we were super bummed about that, because Connor does so much better at home, and I know he's in great hands at the hospital. If it's something really serious, he's way safer at the hospital. But I was thinking it wasn't that big a deal, because they told me sometimes that happens after surgery. And so the nurse said what he may want to do is send you home on oxygen. And I was super nervous about that, but I wanted to go home. So she talked to the doctor, and she came back in, and she said it's either go home with home health sending you home with oxygen, or go home or stay in the hospital another night. And this is where I probably made an error. I probably did something I shouldn't have done, but I didn't know. We live and we learn. I just wanted him to rest. He was very irritable. He was very upset because we weren't home. He was in a weird place, and so I said, we'll do home health and we'll take oxygen. So we come home. He was really happy to leave the hospital. He was very excited. We came home, and he even told the nurse thank you, because we've been trying to sign thank you. He signed thank you and thanked the nurse, and so we get home. He's happy. He's playing. Everything's all good. Of course, he's on pain meds, so he's pretty doped up, but he's drinking, he's eating, he was doing really good. So home health comes, and they're explaining to me how to do the oxygen and stuff, and I was super nervous, but I was so happy to be home. And they told me to put the oxygen on him at night, and then we had I don't know the names of all this. I'm probably going to make myself sound super crazy, but anyway, we had the thing that tells his heart rate, oxygen, all that good stuff. And the lady was super nice. Children's Home Health is awesome. And so they were really good. And she explained everything to me. She went over questions. I signed paperwork. And meanwhile, Connor's running around playing. And he started sounding rattly. And the lady, that comes and helps you set it up, she's a nurse. And she said, she was explaining something to me. And Connor was just in the background, and she's in the middle of what she was saying. She said, if he sounds like that tomorrow, you need to take him to the doctor. He's rattly. And she just kept on talking, and I was like, yeah, he hadn't been doing that all day. I was hoping it was just because he was running around, because it's hard when they're on pain meds, when they get to feeling good, to keep them down. And he was bouncing off the walls because we were home. He was excited. Anyway, I said, yeah, he hadn't been doing that to now, of course, and we laughed because it seems like nothing happens till you leave the hospital. It's just like when they're sick and you go in and you're telling the doctor, and they all of a sudden are feeling great and they're not doing what you're talking about. And anyway, everything was fine. She left. So that night, I gave Connor his medicine. He went to bed. He got a bath. He went to bed. Everything was all good. So I go to my room, and we have 2 monitors. One monitor where I could see him, and then I took his old monitor that we still have. I was really glad we still had it, and I aimed it at the I don't know what to call it, but the thing that tells what his oxygen rate is and what his heart rate is. So that way I had that in my bedroom too. So I had on my phone where I could see him from the one camera, and then I had the monitor facing that where I could see what it said. And so I'm exhausted. I'm so tired because, face it, you cannot sleep in the hospital. Plus, they came in all night because his oxygen kept dipping. Anyway, so I get in bed, and the monitor starts going off. Like, it's an alarm. It's waking you up. So the monitor starts going off. And by the time I, like, roll over and grab the monitor where I can see him and where I can see, and he's just asleep in there, and where I can see why it's beeping, it's his oxygen level, and anything under 88, it'll go off. And it had dipped, and so before I could even get out of bed, it would go back up, and everything would be fine. So I was like, well, he's just dipping a little bit. There's nothing I can really do. He's got on oxygen. Part of the problem, I think, was why he would dip even with oxygen, is they sent us with the oxygen that goes in his nose, and in all reality, which he would not have slept with it on, but in reality, we really needed a mask because he was a mouth breather. He's a lot better now, actually. He breathes through his nose a lot more after tonsils and adenoids were out, but he was still swollen and stuff and healing, and so that's part of the problem, because I've had a lot of people ask why, if he had on oxygen, was he dipping, and that's why. So this went on for hours, and before I could get up, it would, come shoot right back up, and I'm like, there's no sense in waking him up, it's fine now, so so I wasn't getting very good sleep, but I mean, I'm not complaining. That's fine. It's my child. That's fine. And so, about, I think around 2 in the morning, I think is what time it was, the monitor went off. And I laid there for just a second, because I'm like, it's going to dip right back up. But it kept going off. So I get the monitor, because I'm trying to not wake Jeremy up, because he was trying to work the next day. Anyway, I get the monitor, and his oxygen is down to like 79, which is very, very bad. I mean, 88, the monitor will go off, It's dipped down to 79, and his heart rate was in the 190s and climbing. Like, when I looked at the monitor, it was just keep going up, up, up. So I jumped out of bed. I went in there to him, and when I got in there to him, he was trying to cry, but like no noise would come out. He was breathing that heavily. So I picked him up, and when I picked him up, I couldn't stand to have his body on mine. Like, his skin was so hot. So I brought him in the living room, and he's still trying to cry, but he can't cry and breathe. Like, he's breathing so hard. And I got the thermometer, I checked his temperature, and it was 103.9, and it scared the crap out of me, because they, send you home with a fact sheet, and it's on the fact sheet, it said anything over 101, come back to the emergency room, something's wrong. So I'm freaked out at this point, and so it was time for his pain meds, though. So I gave him pain meds, and in just a few minutes, he settled back down, and I sit down on the couch with him. I text my mom, because I knew that unless absolutely necessary, we didn't want to call an ambulance, because we were still paying on his last ambulance bill, because he had 2 ambulance rides in one day. shortly before that. And so obviously, if it's an emergency, I would have called an ambulance, which it was an emergency, but you know what I mean. And so, and at the time, I knew this was serious, but I didn't know how serious this really was at the time. So I sat down on the couch with him, and I had texted my mom and said, hey, we need to go back to Children's. We might need to go back to Children's. I can't get Connor's fever to come down. Connor's got a fever now, and I can't get it to come down, because it come down to like 102, I think, which was coming down. It steadily takes time, but you know, when you're a mother and you want it to come down immediately. You want it within 5 minutes of taking Tylenol to be like 98. But, so, I sat down on the couch with him. He settled back down once the pain med kicked in. His breathing settled back down, and he fell asleep. And so I never slept. I sat on the couch and I watched him sleep, and I just told myself, he's really irritable. He really needs sleep. Let me let him sleep. But I was going to take him to the emergency room. Don't get me wrong, but let me let him sleep here while he's okay and he's resting. So I called the doctor on call, which is what I had been told to do if anything went on or he had a high temp. And he didn't answer at first, but he called me back, and he's like, hey, you know, it wasn't our doctor, it was another doctor in the office. Hey, what's going on? And so I told him, I said his temperature's 104, and he's breathing, his oxygen's been down to 79. And he was like, you need to go to the emergency room, like, immediately. And I was like, okay, thanks, bye. Beep, beep, click. And so, he was still sleeping. My mom woke up later on, and she texted me and was like, okay, let's go. And so we left. I keep a hospital bag in my car. And the reason for that is because we've just had so many times where we have had to go to the hospital, or he's got sick and we've all of a sudden went to the doctor, and boom, you're right in an ambulance, you're admitted. And I just always have it with me that way. So see, I didn't have to pack a bag. Everything was ready. I have an extra charger. I have clothes. I have everything that we will need. I have clothes for him, clothes for me, and I keep that in my car. And it has been a lifesaver so many times. So if you have a child who's sick a lot or hospitalized a lot, definitely should do that. I'm sure you probably already are, but that's my advice. Definitely do that. So we get to the emergency room, and there was only like 2 other people in there because it's, very early in the morning, and they immediately take us back, and his oxygen is, I think it was in the 70s when they first put something on him to check it. Well, backtrack, I got ahead of myself. We're driving on the way up there, and we get in the morning traffic. Connor his breathing is crazy. You can see it. And I immediately knew it's pneumonia. Because he's had pneumonia so many times. I'm not trying to say I'm a pro. I'm not trying to act like I'm an expert. But when you can look at him and tell, you can pick it out. It was in his neck. It was in his chest. It was in his stomach. It was bad. And on the way up there, it got worse. And we got in the morning traffic, unfortunately, on our way to Knoxville, and we got stopped. And I kept turning around and looking back at him, and every time I looked at him, he looked paler. His stomach was really pumping. His lips were a little purplish, and I started looking around, and I was thinking in my mind, how is an ambulance going to get to us? Because I really thought I was going to have to call 911, and an ambulance was going to have to come at the median somehow and get him from us. And then we would be stuck in traffic. And I kept thinking, gosh, Lord, please, please let this traffic go on. We need to be there ASAP. And it did. Finally, it just broke loose, and we drove on. And anyway, then when we got to the hospital, they immediately took us back. And it was so low that there was 4 nurses in our room. And anytime you're somewhere with that many nurses in your room, it's not good. And So, they asked me what I thought, and I said, he has pneumonia a lot. I'm pretty sure it's pneumonia. And they hooked him up to oxygen, of course. And his oxygen, they kept having to give him more and more and more. And I think he was on 3 or 4 at one point, which may not sound like a big deal, but to us it was. They took him for a chest x-ray. Meanwhile, we got left in the room a lot. And the monitor would beep and beep and beep. And again, I think he was breathing out his mouth, and that's why they kept jacking up the oxygen, but he would still dip. I'm pretty sure he was, because they didn't have a mask on him, I'm pretty sure he was breathing out of his mouth and not his nose. So, of course, the IV was very traumatic for him. He was very upset about that. And then they were gone, and nobody was in our room for a little while. And, he was just laying there. He was very lethargic. He looked very sick. And finally, the nurse came back in, and she said, "I am really, really sorry. We just had an emergency come in. A pretty bad one." And so, you want to get mad, and you try not to be impatient, but you're impatient when it's your child. But to know that somebody come in really, really hurt, and to know that we were in a bad situation too, but someone come in a worse situation than us, to me was really scary. And we definitely understood, and we were fine with having to wait. So she told us, they finally come back in from x-rays, and they told us there's definitely some stuff in his lungs. They're really cloudy. And Connor has pneumonia a lot. And you might think that I'm immune to it, or I'm not really immune to it, but I'm tougher or braver, but I'm not. It scares me every single time. So we got sent upstairs to a room, and it was really depressing, because we had just left the hospital the day before, and we were so happy, and we had put it behind us. And so obviously I knew we needed to be there, but it was really depressing, and it was really, really hard on him. When a doctor did come in and see us, she said that he could have definitely quit breathing. It was really bad, and I don't think I really realized how bad it was until we got on the interstate and got in that traffic. But anyway, they told us they didn't know how long we would be there. We ended up being there 3 days, 4 days. I think we went home on the 4th day. Connor got really depressed. Sorry. Connor got really depressed. He wouldn't get out of bed. We would try to get him up. He had an IV, and then of course the thing on his foot reading his pulse. And we would try to get him up, and he would cry and reach for the bed. And he was really, really depressed. He would take his fist and he would punch the bed beside him. And I've never seen him do anything like that. He just really wanted to go home. We all did. But they took really good care of us. The doctors and nurses were really, really nice. The only thing I will complain about is him getting his pain meds. When we got there, you could only give them every 4 hours because it was hydrocodone, so it was some pretty strong stuff. I had gave it to him when I got him up, when all that started. And when we got there, there was like an hour until he needed it again. And they
wouldn't give it to him. You know, they're like, we're about to put you in a room and all that. And then the emergency happened, and he got put in a room. And I said, he really needs his pain meds. Can you please get his pain meds? And the nurse said, well, a doctor has to approve that before he can get him, but I'll check into it. I'll send her a note, or however they do it on their iPad or whatever, their computer or whatever. I'll send her a note and let her know that he's due them. And I don't want to talk bad about him at all, but I mean, I know they can look at their computer, and I know they knew he just had his tonsils and adenoids out the previous day. Well, 2 days before, but anyway. But I still feel like maybe they didn't realize that, dude, he literally just had his tonsils and adenoids took out. And he was in so much pain. And his doctor had told us, do not let him get behind on pain meds. If you have to set an alarm at night and wake him up every 4 hours, you give them to him, because you cannot get behind on the pain, because it's going to be hard to get ahead, and he's not going to be able to tell you. I think we got up to 8 hours, which means we missed 2 doses. And I could tell he was in a lot of pain. He was screaming, and he would just cry and cry. And anybody who knows Connor knows he's not like me. He don't cry unless he's hurt. And he cried and he cried. And hurt or told no, let me add that in. He does cry if you tell him no. But anyway, so I was getting really mad. I was being a mama bear. And I finally told the nurse, well, I have the bottle here in my purse. I'll just give it to him then. And she told me that I could get in a lot of trouble for that. Which I know that, but I couldn't stand to see him in pain. Like, to me, it would have been worth getting in a lot of trouble over. But finally, they came in and told me he could have it, and they gave it to him. But then they told me it was PRN, and he would just get it as needed. And so right at the 4th hour on the dot, I would hit the button and I would call the nurse and I would be like, he needs pain meds. And they'd come in and they'd be like, oh, do you think he's in pain? Do you know? And again, I don't want to dog them. I love them. They've been really good to us. But that was my first bad experience with them. And again, I think they were treating what was right in front of them, which was the pneumonia. And I don't think maybe they were fully grasping that he literally just had all this done. And so, what they think happened to Connor was, they think during surgery he aspirated. It can happen. It's just one of them freak accident things, just one of them freak flukes that happens. He aspirated, and which, for those that don't know, aspiration is when you get fluid down in your lungs. So that's what it was. So we got a different kind of antibiotic than he normally gets when it's from like mucus and stuff in his lungs. And so he responded well. Of course, we came home on it too. But the day they told us a couple times we would get discharged if he could go all night with no oxygen. And every single night he needed oxygen. And it was just, like I said, he was really depressed, and I was getting depressed, and he was agitated, and I was agitated, and I was having to beg for pain meds, and I was just getting really mad. And he would make it all day not needing oxygen, and I would think, man, we're going home tomorrow. And they're like, if he can make it all night, sorry, somebody texted me. They're like, if he can make it all night, you're going home tomorrow. And I'd be like, man, we're going home tomorrow. And we'd get so excited. And then his oxygen would drop during the night, and they would put oxygen on him, and I would know that we weren't going home the next day. We'd have to make it through a whole nother day and a whole nother night, and it was really hard. And then the last night, the 3rd night, they had told us, another doctor came in, and she told us, how about we go home tomorrow if he don't need oxygen? And I'm like, yes, please. And we had several really good nurses, and one of them, I don't remember her name, but she was super nice, and she told me, we're gonna stay off oxygen tonight, we're gonna do it. I'm sorry. And she told me ways to kind of help. She said if the monitor goes off, I want you to watch that monitor, because you could see it there on the wall. And she said if it gets close to 88, she said if it gets to 88, that alarm's going to go off. And she said when it gets to like 89, she said I want you to grab him and I want you to sit him up in bed and I want you to hit him on the back. If you hit him on the back, it'll help him cough. We wanted him to cough because it was clearing his airway and getting stuff out of his lungs, but at the same time, from the tonsils removal, it hurt him really bad to cough. So I said, okay. And he did really good that night until about 2 a.m. And I heard a beep, and it was the oxygen. And she had told me that if it barely beeps, I still have time, but if it beeps for like longer than a minute, that she has to come in and put oxygen on him, and once oxygen goes on him, we're not going home. So I said, okay. So I jumped out of the bed, the couch bed thing. I jumped up and I grabbed him and I set him up, and he started crying because he was just trying to rest and he couldn't get any sleep, and he was mad and he was agitated and he just wanted to go home. And I started hitting him on the back. And that is literally, I crawled up in the bed with him and I put him in my lap. And that is literally what I did from 2 a.m. all the way till about 10 or 11 when he woke up. When he would wake up, it would be fine. It was when he was sleeping, it was going down. And I don't mean going down like, I wouldn't have let them discharge him again if it was going down. It was just like going to like 88, 87, which isn't great, but it wasn't like it was dropping way down and I tricked everybody into letting us go home. But anyway, and so that's what I did from 2 a.m. all the way till about 10, but it was worth it because we got to go home. And Connor waved and he told him all bye. He blew kisses. And he thanked the nurse. And anyway, we were super happy to come home. And a lot of you may not know, but if you're around him some, you may know. But anytime, because they had me hit him on the back to get him to cough. And so anytime he coughs now, he'll point to his back and he wants you to hit him on the back. And he does it all the time. And it's really cute and it's really funny and we laugh, but it's really sad and it's really scary. And one of the doctors told me that we should have never been discharged and we should have never been sent home on oxygen. That if he was a child who'd never been on oxygen, we shouldn't have been home with oxygen. In reality, I wish we hadn't been discharged to begin with, but it was my choice, and it was a poor decision on my part, but we didn't know then what was going on. We had no idea that he had pneumonia. And I will say about being sent home on oxygen, it saved his life. Because they told me that he could have quit breathing at any time. His breathing was that labored. And had that monitor not went off and woke me up, he would have just stopped breathing. And he's had lots of sickness and we've had lots of scary moments. But when someone tells you that, and when you think about the reality of that and how that would have played out the next morning, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So that's what happened. I don't want to scare anybody if your child's about to have their tonsils and adenoids out, because this is a really rare thing that happened to us, and it's just, one of those things that just happened. We don't know exactly how it happened. We could take guesses. We could, but it just happened. And I always say if it's going to happen, it's going to happen to Connor. But he is a tough boy. He's super resilient. And he's always fine. He always is. And God always gets us through. He's always very faithful. And so we were told it would take 6 weeks for him to fully heal and us to see results. Once he healed, once he was better from the pneumonia and it was all gone, he never snored again. He don't toss, he don't turn. He might flip from his belly to his back or vice versa. But he doesn't roll, he doesn't toss, he doesn't turn. He's in a big boy bed now, he don't need the bars. And so it's difficult for me to say that I recommend it because we had such a scare. But like I said, our situation was very rare, and the scare wasn't really, it was due to the surgery because I think he aspirated during surgery, but the scare wasn't really the surgery itself, if you get what I'm trying to say there. It was, but it wasn't. It's helped him a really lot, and so I definitely recommend it, and I don't want to scare anybody because, like I said, our situation is super rare. But I just wanted to share our story because I was going to say maybe it'll help somebody, but probably all it's going to do is scare you to death if your kidneys or tonsils or adenoids out. But that is not what I meant to do. I want to share what God did for us because, sorry, a lot of times bad stuff happens and we get really mad at God and we don't understand. And we're like, why did we have to go through this? Why did my child have to go through this? It was supposed to be 1 night in the hospital and it turned into 4, and all this stuff's happening and we don't understand. But the thing is, if bad things happen, but if you look around, you can find a lot of good in them. And if you look around, you can see God's fingerprints, and you can see that it could have played out a lot differently, but God had his hand on you. And I don't know why we were discharged that first day. I know I wanted to be, but that's just how it played out. But I'm so thankful God's hand was on our story and we got the oxygen. Because had we not, my child may not be here today. So it was a hard time. It was a scary time. But I could see God's handprint on being sent home with the oxygen. It saved his life. It woke me up. And we got him help. So I encourage you to, if you're in the middle of a storm and if you're asking God why, I encourage you to take a different look at every detail of your story and how it's played out, because I guarantee you there's tiny, tiny ways, and it may not be big stuff, it may be the tiny stuff, but God is there and God has his hand on you and he is faithful even in the scary moments and even in the trials that we don't understand and the things that we just cannot comprehend. He is there and he has a hold of you and he loves you, and he wants you to turn to him and he wants you to rely on him. Thanks.